Breaking news is unfolding right now, and what just happened has instantly shifted the entire conversation around power, law, and accountability in the United States. At exactly 2:17 p.m. inside a federal courtroom, a decision was made that triggered an immediate reaction from Donald Trump, and within minutes, the situation escalated from a legal dispute into something far bigger. But if you're only seeing the headlines, you're missing the real story, because this moment didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was building, quietly and methodically, over the past 72 hours, and once you see how each piece connects, you'll understand why this outcome may have been unavoidable. What happened today wasn't just about one decision. It was about a chain reaction that started days earlier, when a legal boundary that had been clearly defined was tested again. Inside the courtroom, Judge Tanya Chutkan had already established a pattern, a process that gave multiple opportunities for compliance. This wasn't sudden, and it wasn't impulsive. Every step had been documented, every warning recorded, every consequence clearly outlined. So when the moment came today, it didn't feel like a surprise to those following closely. It felt like the final step in a sequence that had been moving in one direction from the start. To understand why everything changed today, you have to go back to the beginning of the week. Monday morning seemed routine on the surface, but one action quickly disrupted that calm. A post appeared that included material connected to an ongoing federal case, and that detail alone triggered immediate concern. This wasn't just commentary or opinion. This was information that had been placed under restrictions by the court. Once it became public, it crossed a line that had already been defined months earlier. Within hours, legal teams responded. The reaction was fast, precise, and urgent. An emergency motion was filed, and the court scheduled a hearing the same day. That speed alone told observers everything they needed to know. The system was not going to let this pass quietly. As Monday progressed, the tone shifted from concern to escalation. This was no longer a minor issue that could be handled with a warning alone. The court recognized the seriousness of what had happened, and by the time the day ended, the situation had already moved into a more serious phase. Still, there was room for correction. There was still a path to de-escalation, and that path led directly into Tuesday. Tuesday became the turning point. Inside the courtroom, arguments were presented, explanations were offered, but the judge's message came through with absolute clarity. There would be no ambiguity going forward. A final warning was issued, and it was specific in a way that left no room for interpretation. A deadline was set. A requirement was defined. And most importantly, a consequence was attached to failure. This wasn't just a warning in theory. It was a structured legal step designed to create a record, one that would justify whatever came next. At that moment, the situation transformed from flexible to fixed. Before Tuesday, there had been multiple chances to adjust course. After Tuesday, there was only one. Comply within the given time, or face escalation. That clarity is what made everything that followed so significant, because when a deadline is clearly defined in a legal context, it becomes more than just a suggestion. It becomes a trigger point. Then came the wait. A full 24 hours where everything depended on one decision. Observers, analysts, and legal experts watched closely, knowing that this window would determine the next phase. Would there be compliance? Would there be resistance? Would there be some form of compromise? As the hours passed, the tension built, because the stakes were no longer theoretical. The consequences had been clearly outlined. And then the deadline passed. No compliance. No reversal. No indication that the situation would be corrected within the required time frame. In that moment, the direction of the story became clear. The system, which had already outlined its next step, was now obligated to move forward. This is where many people misunderstand what happened next. They see it as a sudden escalation, but in reality, it was the continuation of a process that had already been set in motion. Wednesday arrived, and with it, the moment that would define everything. Inside the courtroom, the conditions had already been met. A violation had occurred. A warning had been issued. A deadline had been missed. In legal terms, that sequence matters, because it removes discretion. It creates a scenario where action is no longer optional. It becomes procedural. At 2:17 p.m., Judge Tanya Chutkan made the decision official. The action was signed, confirmed, and immediately set into motion. And just like that, the situation shifted from legal tension into legal enforcement. This wasn't just about arguments anymore. This was about consequences being applied in real time. Within minutes, Donald Trump reacted. And that reaction became the next focal point of the entire story. Because at this stage, the options are no longer about avoiding consequences. They are about responding to them. Every word, every statement, every move now carries weight, not just legally, but politically and strategically as well. The reaction isn't just a response. It's a signal, one that indicates what direction this situation might take next. And this is where the story becomes even more intense, because once a legal process reaches this stage, control begins to shift. Earlier in the week, control was largely in the hands of legal teams and strategic decisions. Now, it starts to move toward enforcement mechanisms, toward systems that operate based on procedure rather than negotiation. That shift is critical, because it changes the nature of what happens next. As things stand right now, the next phase will be defined by a very limited set of possibilities. There can be a controlled response, where the situation is managed in a way that minimizes escalation. Or there can be resistance, which forces the system to take further action. And once that second path is taken, the dynamics change completely, because enforcement is no longer theoretical. It becomes real. This is why this moment is being watched so closely. It's not just about what has already happened. It's about what comes next. The next 48 hours are critical, because they will determine whether this situation stabilizes or escalates even further. Every decision made during this window will have consequences that extend far beyond this single case. But there's an even bigger layer to this story, one that goes beyond the immediate events. What we are seeing here is a test of how legal authority interacts with political power at the highest level. It's a moment where theory becomes reality, where questions that were once hypothetical are now being answered in real time. And that's why this situation feels different. It's not just another legal development. It's a moment that could shape how similar situations are handled in the future. For years, there has been debate about how far the system can go when dealing with individuals who hold or have held the highest office. Those debates often remained abstract, discussed in legal circles and academic settings. But now, those questions are no longer abstract. They are being played out in real time, with real consequences. And that's what makes this moment so significant. It's not just about one decision or one reaction. It's about the intersection of law, power, and accountability. It's about what happens when boundaries are tested and whether those boundaries hold. Right now, everything is still unfolding. The situation is still developing. The next steps have not yet been fully determined. But one thing is clear. The events of the past 72 hours have already changed the landscape. They have set something in motion that cannot simply be undone. As we move forward, every update will matter. Every development will add another layer to this story. And if the past few days have shown anything, it's that things can change very quickly. So if you're trying to understand what just happened, don't just look at the moment itself. Look at the path that led here. Because once you see that path, once you see how each step connected to the next, the bigger picture becomes clear. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't random. This was a sequence. And now, we're watching what happens next.